I think we'll go ahead and get started, everyone. My name is Kelly Dudley, and I'm with the New Center, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. The webinar today is entitled State of Blended Cements, a look at Ash Grove's products, Duracem F and Duracem N, and we're so glad you could join us today. A video recording and PDF of today's webinar and presentation will be uploaded to the new website, newconcrete.org, following today's webinar. Okay, attendees are in listen-only mode, and you'll have an opportunity to ask questions via the Q&A box at the end of today's presentation. Now I'd like to introduce you to News Executive Director Carrie Sutton, who will gladly introduce our today's speaker. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, everybody, for attending this afternoon. My name is Carrie Sutton. I am the Executive Director of New, and we really thank Mike for taking time out of his busy schedule to give this presentation today. I'm really looking forward to it. Also like to introduce another one of the new staff. I don't know if Mahmoud, you're on here. You want to just pop up real quick?
Yes, thank you, Kerry. Hello, everybody. My name is Mahmoud Ekenel. I am the new Validation Verification Program Director.
Thanks,
you.
Thanks, Mahmoud. And Mahmoud and I will be kind of going through some of the questions at the end, so you'll see our faces again. But wanted to introduce Mike. Mike Fedorko is the Director of Customer Solutions at Ash Grove Cement, where he is responsible for delivering innovative customer solutions through new product development and product optimization. His work is focused on advancing the use of blended cements to meet evolving industry needs. Mike has over 20 years of experience in the building materials industry and has developed deep expertise across product management, new product development, technical services, and sales. And his broad background enables him to bridge technical innovation with practical customer applications, helping drive value for both customers and the business. So, Mike, if you want to get started here with your presentation, we're really looking forward to it. And again, if you have questions during the presentation, just go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll get to those towards the end of the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, everyone, for taking some time out of your schedule today to go through our presentation. As they said, we'll have some question and answer time at the end. So let's get started. So I just want to give you a brief overview of what I'm going to present today. I'll give you an introduction to CRH for those of you who are not familiar with who we are and what we do. Also included in that is, who is Ash Grove and Eco Material Technologies, and also what do we do, and then how does that kind of work into what I'm going to discuss at the end with our case study of our Duracem N blended cement product. And prior to getting into that, we'll also touch on, what is the state of blended cements in the industry today. So just to introduce you all to CRH, we are the leading building materials business in the world. We manufacture and supply a wide range of building products, materials, and innovative end-to-end solutions to the construction industry. Our products can be found throughout the built environment, whether it's in infrastructure or homes or commercial buildings. We have a long-standing and proven commitment to sustainability, and we're always considered amongst the leaders when it comes to those ideals. Our materials, value-added products, and building solutions play an important role in shaping a more sustainable built environment. As you'll see as I go through the presentation today, it's in our DNA. CRH is also, been included in the Fortune Global 500 list for over 20 years now. So large organization, a lot of different business units, as you will see. But today we're going to focus mainly on the cement side of things. So taking a look at a CRH's portfolio of products and services. So anything from aggregates, lime, cement, ready-mix concrete, pipes, precast concrete products, asphalt, construction services, outdoor living. So think of, pavers, retaining wall blocks, things like that, composite structures, and also a whole host of construction accessories make up our portfolio. So we're an international business. Primarily most of our operations are here in North America, but we are also, we started out in Europe. We have, extensive operations there as well as in Australia. Our focus markets are on aggregates, cementitious, which we'll be discussing today, roads, and water. So what is cementitious? So when we say the cementitious here at CRH, what does that mean? So, traditionally that was a clinker, ground limestone based cement, right? That's been used throughout, modern history to build lots of things. And more recently, supplementary cementitious materials have come more and more into play as we start to talk about blended cements and the opportunities that they present. And that means, traditionally fly ash that comes from coal-fired power plants, slag from steel production, calcined clay, which is naturally occurring products that can be mined, and then also naturally occurring pozzolans. So while CRH has a long history, their activities in the cementitious business is relatively new. It didn't begin until 2015. So at that point in North America, they had no operations. They did some acquisitions, a series of acquisitions, as you can see up on the screen here, starting in 2015 of cement assets and cement producing assets throughout the North America and Canada and the US. In 2018, they acquired Ash Grove, who I work for today, and their assets that gave them a large footprint throughout the United States. And then along the way, they've continued to acquire and build on that in 2024 with some assets that came over from Martin Marietta to continue to expand our traditional cement production business. Along the way, we also created what we call our Sapphire Group. They are focused on alternative fuels and sources of innovative SCMs. And then most recently, which some of you may have seen in the news, last year we acquired Eco Material Technologies, who is the leading provider of coal ash based SCMs in North America. So when we talk about cementitious just to kind of wrap things up here under CRH, it's the three companies, kind of working together in conjunction that I have up here on the screen. It's Ash Grove, who is, one of the leaders in North America of manufacturing traditional cements and blended cements. Eco Material Technologies, our newest family member, they are a leader in bringing SCMs to the market. And then Sapphire, who is, transforming residual and non-recyclable materials into alternative fuels and raw materials that we can use for our products. So when we look at that, kind of what are we doing with all of that? Well, our goal is to be integrated with those three businesses, customer focused, and we want to develop the next generation of cementitious solutions, for the market and our customers. We have a coast-to-coast network now with the addition of Eco Material Technologies. So we have service, as you can see on the map here, 12 cement plants, 170 distribution facilities, 75 fly ash sources and storage. And we have over 3,300 people working in the organization today. We have a comprehensive portfolio of high-end and performance and durable innovative materials, including limestone cement, which is a majority of what we've been producing here, fresh fly ash, harvested fly ash, calcined clay products, steel slag, natural pozzolans, and green cement offerings that are innovative binder solutions that are being offered by Eco Materials, known as PozzoSlag and PozzoCem. So when you kind of break up that footprint that I said from coast to coast, this just gives you a little bit better idea of where we operate as Ash Grove and Eco Material Technologies. They're regional based in some areas. In other areas, we have quite a concentration of assets and facilities. So just to give you a little more background on who Ash Grove, who we are. So while Ash Grove was acquired in 2018 by CRH, it's not a new business. It's been around since 1882, where it was founded. Has over 2,000 employees across 60 locations here in North America, and we service customers in the US and Canada. We deliver high performance cementitious materials, technical expertise, and customer support. We're focused on innovation and on consistent quality and sustainability. Our products go into building everyday infrastructure, whether it's highways and bridges, schools, public facilities, commercial and residential projects. We're committed to safety, operational excellence, and our customer success. Eco Material Technologies, they're North America's largest marketer of coal combustion products. As you saw, they have a nationwide network of terminals and distribution facilities, servicing customers across multiple industries. They deliver sustainable cementitious materials, primarily SEMs, that can be used in blended cements, resource recovery and beneficiation solutions at sites, technical expertise in those areas, and logistics support. They have an extensive logistics network to help service their customers anywhere in North America. Supporting infrastructure, they support, the production of concrete and other construction materials, manufacturing applications, land management, and redevelopment projects. Their commitment is to innovation, sustainability, and operational excellence. So just to dive deeper into who EcoMaterial is, it's on the surface, you see the products that they sell, into the market and produce, whether, the fly ash, the beneficiated ash, harvested products, Syngyp, things like that. But on the backside, they're also, when we talk about sustainability and, kind of promoting, green products, they're providing a service to the coal industry, the coal-fired power industry. Historically, that fly ash has been used in, cements and concrete. But in this case, a lot of it could not be used or maybe wasn't deemed suitable at the time for use, so it was landfilled. There are large landfills throughout the United States near coal plants that are, holding this unused coal ash. EcoMaterials provides a service where they will harvest that and they will beneficiate it and get it ready for use, that it can be used as a suitable SEM in product. So not only are they on the front end providing a product, that's, providing more sustainable, lowering a clinker in cement, but also, they're taking waste product that was just in a landfill at the coal-fired power plants and, putting it to a good use. So just a little bit more about EcoMaterial, because they're our newest family member, as I said, about what they do and, their products and services for those of you who aren't familiar with them. Fresh fly ash, is a big part of their business. So, harvesting, partnering with coal-fired power plants throughout the U.S., harvesting that fresh fly ash, the logistics involved with getting it to the customers and handling that. As I just mentioned, the landfilled ash that's near these plants that's been sitting there for many, many years in some cases, they are heavily invested into harvesting and the beneficiation of that product to make it into a usable product that we here in the cement industry can utilize. They're also involved in natural pozzolan processing. They have a few sites throughout the U.S. where natural pozzolans are being sourced and being processed and made usable as an SEM for cements and concretes. They have a manufactured products. So when you look at, I mentioned the Pozzo slag and the Pozzo Sem in the open, they're alternative binder materials that they are taking what was deemed, somewhat unusable products, right? They're waste products, and being able to transform them into something that's, kind of an interesting and neat, innovative solution. Once again, in these cases, some of these are zero clinker factor type materials. They're also involved in gypsum, so the synthetic material that's made from sulfate mineral that goes into Portland cement and drywall. This is something that happens at some of their operations near the coal-fired power plants. So that's another product that they create and sell. And then also, like I mentioned, the logistics network that they have, moving these things by rail and by truck through work from coast to coast. So taking all this into account as a cementitious, right, and as CRH, we're taking a lead in decarbonization. We have a long track record of doing so and trying to lead the industry in that direction. It is important to us. It's in our DNA. We want to continue to accelerate and raise everyone's ambition levels when it comes to that. We've committed to some ambitious goals. So a 30% absolute reduction in group-wide emissions by 2030. And then also, targeting scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. And that aligns with our ambitious targets of being carbon neutral by 2050. In addition to what I mentioned with Ash Grove and what we're doing with blended cements and the eco, CRH also has an innovation fund that's a dedicated innovation fund that invests in internal projects and external partnerships to help support new technologies and innovative ideas. And then there's also a wing of CRH known as CRH Ventures. It's a corporate venture capital arm that will partner and invest in startups. So once again, supporting these innovative new ideas to bring low carbon solutions to the market. So our next segment here is going to be on blended cements and new SCMs and kind of the state of where things are at and where we're headed. So the American Concrete Association, put out the roadmap to carbon neutrality. There's a lot of pieces to it, right? Whether it's on the clinker side, reducing CO2 emissions there. It's on the cement side. What can we do? We're talking specifically here about blended cements and lowering our CO2 footprint with that. In concrete, obviously something that goes into concrete, it can be low carbon, but if it doesn't last very long, then it's really significantly the life cycle is high carbon. So we want to make products that last and are more durable than even what's been put out there in the past. And then, the carbonation as a sink, a CO2 sink as well. So there's different pieces to the chain. But, today we're talking about the blended cement piece to it. So blended cements have been utilized successfully in many parts of the world and here in the US for many, many years. There's immediate opportunities to continue to leverage that and, expand upon that to help meet these goals in the roadmap. But in order to do that, we have to increase acceptance and adoption of blended cements. That's not something that, just happens with the flick of a switch. There's, a lot we all need to work together as an industry to put out, good products that are not only sustainable, but they're also durable, right? And meet the needs of our end users and are going to last the test of time. Taking a look at where we're at today here in the US. So blended cement growth has taken off, since 2022. And that's really been driven by the adoption of Type 1L cements, who are, considered a blended cement. But that has driven it. So there has been some changes. The positive is it's the most widely used type of cement in the United States today. There's many, many successful projects out there utilize that and have been utilizing those cements. I would say if there's any negative as an industry, we probably could have done a better job rolling out, introducing the product to the market. But largely, folks have gotten over the initial growing pains with it and, are using it successfully on whether it's infrastructure or residential construction or commercial, whatever it may be, the Type 1L cements have been adopted and are being used. The other good news, DOTs have done a really great job of widely adopting different blended cements, whether it's a Type 1P, a 1S, or a 1T. As you can see from the infographic up here on the screen, many, many states have adopted these products and are allowing the use under their DOT specifications. Some states, are still, there's more ground to be had there, but overall, I would say a majority have, moved in the direction of accepting blended cements. So switching topics now and talking about, okay, what goes into a blended cement, right? So you have your traditional, Portland-based, clinker-based cement blended with some type of SCM. Traditionally, that's been whether, a fly ash that comes from a coal-fired power plant or a slag that comes from a steel blast furnace or a natural pozzolan from a volcanic eruption. There's also starting to be some really interesting and new innovative SCMs being introduced out there by startups that are, going through some kind of transformation in a reactor, taking what was once probably deemed maybe, unreactive waste product that wasn't really, considered for use as an SCM that be ultimately used in a blended cement. But now they're finding out innovative new ways to transform those products and make them useful to our industry. Just kind of looking, geographically where SCMs are available. So coal ash and slag, very widely available historically. There are concentrations around where those industries, and the population centers may have been in the past. With coal, kind of, there's been a downturn as far as the number of coal plants in the U.S. So some of those plants have gone offline, and that production is no longer available. Fresh ash, but there is still, I would say ash that's in landfills that's still available that potentially could be mined out of there and reused for blended cements. Slag, a high concentration around the Great Lakes, right? The Rust Belt, where there was a lot of steel production. Once again, that's another industry that, is gone offshore. So the steel mills are, is not as readily available as maybe as it once was, but there's still a good supply. Plus, there's also imports of that material coming into the United States. And then the natural pozzolan deposits, they're kind of spread out through the U.S., different types depending on where you are. A lot of them in the western part of the United States. Then there's also, as I mentioned, the new binder developments, right? And I apologize if any of you are on the call and, I don't have your company up here. There's so many of them right now getting into the market, bringing innovative new solutions out there for binders or SCMs, as I mentioned, right? They're putting something that maybe potentially was an unused or unusable waste product in the past, figuring out how to transform that and make it into a reactive SCM that we could utilize, or something that lowers the carbon content of the overall, cement mix to, benefit our sustainability goals. But there's so many of them out there, and it's great to see that there's a lot of not only innovation going on, but the market's recognizing that, and they're investing heavily in these businesses. So what's our pathway to blended cement success, right? So we had to continue to prioritize sustainability, but also in addition to sustainability, right, the products need to be resilient. We can make the most low carbon cement out there, but you know what, if it only lasts 10 years and has to be replaced, that adds up pretty quickly, right? So we need products that are resilient. Not only is it not sustainable, if they don't last, it's expensive, right? With the short life cycle. So we want products that are going to stand the test of time, but also be able to, deliver low carbon solutions. We want to adopt performance-based specifications, right? Kind of, let's put the focus on performance out there. When we bring these products to market, how do they perform, right? What box do we have to kind of try to fit them in? Part of that comes with optimized concrete mix designs. As we come to market with these different blended cements, they may be a little different, right, than traditional cements or cements that are being utilized today. There may be some different things that need to happen as far as mix designs. That's something that we need to be aware of and make sure that we're, coming up with those solutions on the front end. We need to invest in training and workforce skills. So just being out there on the ground recently, visiting a bunch of job sites, throughout the U.S., having skilled workforce to be able to you can make the best product in the world, but if somebody cannot install it properly, right, or has the technical skills to handle it, that can be a problem as well. So just making sure the industry is aware of that, and we continue to train and do what we can for those end users out there. As different projects and innovative products are brought online, we want to continue to demonstrate those products and how what they've done and the performance they've brought to the market. So really getting out there and showing those things off to show people, hey, these blended cements are just as good, if not better, than cements you've used in the past. And then we want to continue to collaborate, right? I think, and you'll hear throughout as I speak on this, collaboration is really key. I think, all of us working together from the different points, whether it's academia, whether it's cement producers, SCM producers, ready mix, end users, design, engineers, we all need to work together to be successful here. So what do we, when we talk about, okay, so where do we go, right? And there's all kinds of opportunities out there when we talk about blended cements, different ideas. There's some really great ideas, but there's some things that, we need to consider to make sure that we're going after the right opportunities. We need to understand, first of all, how is this going to improve things for our customers, right? Is there a specification that this could fit in? Does it perform in concrete? We can have great mortar results, but sometimes, as many of you know, right, when you go from mortar to concrete, things change. We need to verify and validate that it performs as expected, if not better, in concrete. You have to consider, how much of it's available, right? Especially when we're talking about SCMs. Is it widely available? Is it economically feasible, right? Is it something that it's going to be around for 3 years? It could be a fantastic product and then it's gone, right? That kind of makes our customers be in a bad spot. So we want to make sure it's readily available. There's a long runway there, and financially it makes sense. Then we also need to consider, we have these ideas we bring up as, product innovators. Can it be made at scale? And what's it going to take from a, CapEx standpoint, right? Material handling, things like that, infrastructure at the plants to take our idea from the lab scale to industrial scale. And is that feasible? And there's many, many others, right? There's logistics as the source your SCM near your plants, storage, drying and milling. There's all kinds of things that, I don't have listed on here, but all things we need to consider when we come up with these ideas and want to bring something to the market. So really what I'm trying to say is it's a balanced approach. We want to balance, CO2 reduction with our customer needs and the economic benefit. If you're on the outsides, you're at the extremes of any one of those three bubbles, you're probably missing out on something, and it kind of lowers your expectations of being commercially viable. We can have the lowest CO2 product out there, but if it's really expensive and it's not economically feasible, or it really doesn't fit the customer needs, it's not going to be successful. Okay. Now I'd like to jump in and kind of give you an overview, a case study here here at Ash Grove, specifically our calcined clay blended cement product known as Duracem N. It's a type 1P35 cement that we are introducing to the market this year. So I'm going to give you an overview of that product and how it came to be, and where we're headed. So before I can get into that, I kind of have to give you the catalyst behind how the story started. Just for those of you out there, many I'm sure you are familiar with alkali silica reaction, ASR, but just a quick level set for everyone. So ASR, is an issue with concrete that can appear when the right conditions pop up. So if you have, high alkali cements in a reactive silica and moisture, and they all are at the right time in the right place, you can have an ASR issue. So how it happens is a gel forms in the cement around the aggregates as a result of these reactive aggregates and the cements having a chemical reaction. That gel, when it becomes in contact with moisture, which most concrete becomes in contact with moisture, will begin to expand. When it expands, it puts intense internal pressure on the concrete, which leads to cracking. And not just like an occasional crack here or there. It's really like an alligator crack, major cracking, deterioration of the slab or the structure. So how does that tie into our Duracem N product and kind of how we got here, or, what we're doing? So the pictures on the right, just some examples of what I just mentioned there with ASR and the damage it can do. As you can see, the deterioration of the paving surfaces, it's extensive when it does occur, and they are very expensive remediation projects. So how did we get here? So our Louisville, Nebraska plant, which is about 30 minutes south of the Omaha area, has been producing a product known as Duracem F since the 1990s to kind of help combat this product. And how it came to be is in the 1990s, the Nebraska Department of Transportation, NDOT, they experienced significant issues related to ASR. They kind of had, the perfect storm of cements that were high in alkali. Their local aggregates and sand and gravels were reactive. And then it's not an arid environment, right? Nebraska, it's going to experience moisture throughout the year. So those three things, getting together cause significant ASR-related cracking and damage to their paved surfaces. They did not have a locally, feasible non-reactive aggregate to help combat that. So Ash Grove, operating the cement plant there in that region, worked with the Nebraska Department of Transportation to come up with a solution. We've experimented with various SCMs to help mitigate ASR through extensive research and pilot projects, working hand in hand with NDOT. Then in 1993, we introduced a product known as our Duracem F. It's a 1P25. It's an interground fly ash and cement product. It's done a fantastic job of mitigating the issues that they were having there in that market. Duracem F has been successfully used since that time in 1993, so over 30 years, in that market as an interground, blended product, blended cement. And it has, performed well throughout history. So as a result of all of that, NDOT saw, the results. They were fabulous for them. It really kind of reduced their issues. they began to specify blended cements for all paving projects. As a result of that, Duracem F was a successful commercial launch starting in the 1990s up until today. And why do I say up until today? Well, there's nothing wrong with Duracem F, continues to be used successfully, but being innovators here at Ash Grove, we're always looking for what's the next thing, right? And we identified many years ago calcined clay as an opportunity not only to tackle the ASR issues successfully that they were having in that region, but also from a sustainability standpoint, right? The increasing, things that were coming from the market we were starting to see in the latter part of the 2000s here to 2010s and things like that, that there were opportunities potentially to leverage a calcined clay blended product at our Louisville plant. So not only, like I said, does it mitigate ASR, it lowers the clinker content of the cement. We saw an opportunity there. This met the needs of our increasing requirements from our end users, our customers looking for a more sustainable, lower clinker cement. There was a national trend. It's moving towards there's fewer coal plants today, in the US than there has been, historically. They continue to close down, and then there's not as much ash available. We also learned, through clay and the calcination process, we could produce a consistent quality product, right? We're manufacturing it. We knew exactly what the performance, we could hold it within a tight window of what it was going to do. So we'd have a very, tight window performance and quality that we could bring to our customers. And the best part of it was it's a locally sourced clay. We were able to find a suitable clay deposit very close to our Louisville, Nebraska plant. So it was a locally sourced clay. It did not have to go, be transported across the US somewhere. There's a lot of it. It's a very long-term supply. So it's going to be a stable, product for many, many years in that market. So just to give you a little history of how we got there with our calcined clay, our Duracem end products, a little timeline here. So began back in 2019. We were exploring, like I said, being innovators, exploring different options. Potentially calcined clay became interesting. In 2020, we began to do some trials on the mill at our Louisville plant, looking at, the strength development and ASR mitigation. And we started playing around with a 30% calcined clay blend. And we submitted that, and we were seeing successful results with it. And we submitted it to NDOT and gained their approval for it. We continued more trials through 2021. There were still some things we were trying to work out with it, but we were able to up the content of clay now to 35%. So just to kind of compare, right, where we finished and where we've been historically with our Duracem F product, our fly ash based product was a 25% replacement. Now we're up to a 35% replacement with the formulation with calcined clay. Then came 2022. As probably all of you that work in this industry know, those were crazy times, right? You couldn't get enough of anything. It doesn't matter if you were in cement, you were in plastics, steel, whatever it may have been related to construction industry. Things were booming. You just couldn't get enough of anything. And as a result, our cements and our Duracem end products, we just couldn't keep up with what our customer demand was. So we had this product known as Duracem N that we had been working with. It looked promising. We talked to some of our customers and they said, yes, we'll take it. It's better than not having anything today. They started using it on projects. We were monitoring feedback. We sent it to them at a 30% blend, a little lower than where we had aggressively been pushing back in 2021, just to kind of mitigate what we thought, to be risk averse as we took it to market. But right away, there started to be some issues with water demand, right? If anybody's familiar with calcined clay, it's a very thirsty material. A lot of great things about it, but one of the negatives is it's very thirsty. So we had to go back to the drawing board a bit and figure out, okay, how do we, lower that water demand and make it perform? Our customers wanted something. They loved our Duracem F product, our fly ash based product. They wanted something, hey, I needed to look, feel, and act just like Duracem F. So we went back to the drawing board in the lab, running trials, trying to figure out, how can we, improve the water demand of that, working with our chemical suppliers, and we were able to, kind of formulate a new product, an improvement on that at a 35% level that we were, actively starting to bring to market here now as we latter stages of 2025. We completed some large trials, whether it been at the lab trials, whether it been at the ready mix level, and then ultimately, as I'll share with you here in a few minutes, a paving project at scale with the Duracem N product. So the key highlights, we are switching. Duracem has been a very successful product. That's that 1P25 fly ash product, been around since 1993. But we are at the point now where we are comfortable and we're ready to go. We've done enough testing and customer trials to introduce our Duracem N. That's our 1P35 calcined clay product here in 2026. So next, I just kind of want to talk to you a little bit more now that you have the history and why and how we went from a fly ash product to a calcined clay product. Just talk to you a little bit about the process that we went through to bring that product to market. We'll start with the clay source identification, talk about some of the trials, validating what we were doing in our labs with third parties to make sure the product was as good as we thought it was. What went into, as far as the process and getting the plant up to speed, and then trials there, and then ultimately customer testing and DOT approval. So number one is, right, we had to find a suitable clay source. There are clay sources, readily available throughout the U.S. Not all of them are the same. Clay varies depending on the properties you're looking for. But ultimately, looking at different sources and finding ones, that were going to work for our project, was an extensive research project. Ultimately, we identified one very close to our plant, which was great just from a logistics, locally sourced, standpoint. And that is the one that we are moving forward with this product. But there's a lot that goes into whether it's core drilling, testing samples in the lab. How feasible is it to get that material out of the ground, right? Is there a lot of overburden there? Is it relatively easy to get to? What kind of infrastructure is in the area? Sometimes these things can be in remote areas. Can you get it out of there, economically and safely to your plant? So like I said, we identified a source that kind of checked all those boxes and, to move forward with our Duracem N clay source. So once you have the clay sourced, you also have to, what is the process, right? You need to be able to handle that material, not only when it comes in from, the source out in the mine, you need material handling, you need equipment to calcine it, you need storage, all those things we had to consider at our plant and make modifications to be able to produce a consistent product. That took some time, obviously, and investment at our Louisville, Nebraska plant. But I can report that we are successfully, online and beginning to produce the product at scale. Taking a look at the testing, as I mentioned, right? I had a test. We had a successful product with Duracem F in the market. It was doing a great job, with the ASR mitigation, which is, we test against the ASTM 1567. But also it had a, strength-wise, had to perform as well. We could probably hit on some things that are, mitigate ASR very well, but, if you don't have the strength, it doesn't nobody any good. So this was a balancing act between the two. As you can see on the graph here on the left, the blue line, the light blue line, the dark blue is the threshold, 0.1 for the testing. Our Duracem F at 30 days was around 0.08, so it was getting the job done successfully. But with calcined clay, as you can see from the brown and the gray lines on the graph here, did an even better job. It basically cut that in half. So it improved the performance and gave, additional, I guess, we'd say just well-being and, make everybody comfortable with when you're doing a road project, right, as a Department of Transportation, that this is going to do its job as said. No matter the conditions, it's going to handle the ASR there. And then from a strength development, as you can see, very similar here with the bars. So the dark blue bar is our Duracem F, and then 2 iterations, the other 2 bars, the gray and the light blue, of our 30% and 35% calcined clay products. As you can see, they perform right in line, a little lower on the early day, but then it catches up rather quickly, and by 28th day, it exceeds what we were seeing with the Duracem F product. So not only, from on the side of the mortar side of things, testing and making a product as a cement producer, a blended cement, we wanted to take it a step further and make sure that it performed in concrete and met our customers' expectations on that side of things. We did a large collaboration with different parties. Some of them were integrated companies, ready mix products companies within CRH, Lyman Ritchie, and Preferred Materials. We also utilized our Ash Grove corporate lab in Kansas City as well to vet some of this out. But we did a lot of trials to understand, the plastic properties and strength and things like that, how the material handled, how it placed, through different test methods. Specifically talking about test methods when it came to concrete, we utilized the float test, which is known as the float test. It was developed by Dr. Tyler Lay to assess the finishing characteristics, right? How's the surface close? What does the surface look like as it's closing? How easily does it, does a trowel of different types pass over it? So we put it through all that. We also, through the process, as we worked hand in hand with these customers and our partners, saw that, hey, that brown cement's pretty interesting looking. I think we heard many comments that it looked like a chocolate bar. The test results look great. It's performing awesome. But can you make it a little more gray? So we heard that loud and clear. There might be some areas where brown would be great, not a big deal, but our customers wanted us to manage color. And that is something we had to go back and say, okay, we need to input a process there to be able to do that successfully and be able to do it consistently. And that is something that we were able to achieve. As you can see here on the right, the photo, I have 3 different photos of mortar blocks. The middle one being the brown, nothing's done to it. It's just the calcined clay blended with the cement. It's the same cement being used there in the float test picture. The picture on the left, the number 1 there, is your traditional 1-2 type cement, which is a gray. And then on the picture number 3 on the right there is the color managed calcined clay. We were able to achieve when that cures out, and it's a little dark on the picture here, but when it cures out, it looks very similar to the traditional gray that you would get from a Portland type 1-2 cement or a type 1L cement. So then came, the most exciting part of this project so far was, okay, we've done all this lab testing, we've done all this scale up at the plants, we've worked with our partners on, evaluating the mortar and the concrete. But, until you get it out into an actual project and put it through the equipment that's actually going to be utilizing it out in the field, you never know, right? So last fall, we conducted a large trial, a 2.5-mile road pour, as slip form paving in Nebraska using this product that was manufactured at our plants, DuraCement 35 product. With partnering with Lyman Ritchie for the ready mix production, working with them at their plants, making sure prior to starting paving that we were out there doing some test mixes, putting them through the plant, putting the material through the trucks, dispensing it, making sure everything was good. We were working flawlessly by the time the paver showed up on the project. The pavers ended up, paving the road with really no issues. It went as planned. Weather cooperated with us. It was late in the fall there, but we got a nice stretch of weather, so that was great. But the feedback from the ready mix level from the paving contractor was, hey, if it wasn't brown at the time because we weren't color managing this batch, or if you didn't, we didn't know any better, we would have thought it was, your DuraCement F product. So that was for us, the best feedback that we could possibly get. So that road went down successfully. Like I said, it was slip form paving. There was some handwork as well that had to be done for tie-ins for driveways and things like that. Same feedback we got from those contractors as well there. It was very easy to use. If you didn't tell us, we would have thought it was, a DuraCement F. We also did another paving project in Chinook, Kansas this March. Similar to the one I mentioned here, not quite as large, but very similar results, very positive. End users, thought it was great. Everything went well. No hiccups. So at that point, we deemed it's okay. We're ready to go to market with this product. The paving project that I mentioned in Nebraska is currently the largest calcined clay concrete project in the United States. So it was a major step. When we talk about sustainable infrastructure, it was a major step of a 35% replacement with a calcined clay and a cement and using it successfully, in a real world application. So not only, like I said, did we worked with our partners, right, the concrete, on the concrete side with Ready Mix and our concrete contractors to successfully, do those installations and pour those roads. There's also the third party testing, right? We want to validate, what we're seeing through a third party, and we have partnered, with Emerald, the Minnesota research division. We've laid down some of it there. We've also worked with the University of California Pavement Research Center there as far as, utilizing calcined clay cements there to do their testing. Just all of this is a partnership. Like I said, it's a collaboration between all of us in the industry to work together on this. So what's the future of blended cements? Continued collaboration throughout, right? We all need to work together to develop the next generation of blended cements. Gaining adoption is key, right? We can have the best products in the world, but if nobody wants to use them or knows how to use them, it's not going to do any of us any good. We are all in this together to ensure success. Continued efforts between all of us, right? Not only here at Ash Grove, but I think throughout the industry as we work towards lower clinker and lowering our carbon footprint. Continued research into SCMs. As I said, there's innovative new ideas, new products coming online every day, continuing to evaluate them. And then balancing sustainability with performance, making sure that not only are the products sustainable, but they perform at what our customers want or exceed their expectations. And I just wanted to call out, this was a team effort, right, with everything we've done with this project, whether it was the NDOT, the Kansas Department of Transportation, as I mentioned, from an academic stand side, Oregon State, UC Davis, our contractors, Hawkins and Cedar Valley, Lyman Ritchie, and Sapphire for our division, helped us identify the clay source and bring that to a reality. And that is what I have. I believe it's time for questions. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Please visit the new website for resources on lower carbon concrete production and placement. The website provides access to our sustainable guide or frequently asked questions, webinar recordings, and more. Mike, if you want to switch to the last slide just real quick, I just want to show we have a QR code that they're able to access the bookstore. Let's see. There we go. You can access the ACI bookstore and you're able to purchase the newly released low carbon concrete guide. And Carrie, if you want to go ahead and field the Q&A questions, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. And Mahmoud, if you want to come on too, you can work with me. There's quite a few questions, Mike. and as you were going through it, I had tons in my head as well. So we'll try to get as much as we can here in the next 10 minutes. But we'll start off with the first one here I have. On harvesting a fly ash seems like there may be an endless supply. Is there an estimate of how long landfill fly ash will supply the cement industry as a supplemental cementitious material? So obviously this is one of your new organizations that are now under the umbrella of CRH. So what can you tell us about that with the fly ash, beneficiated ash?
I'll say it's not endless, right? Because there's a finite amount out there that's in the ground, but there is a significant amount, right? I believe the last estimate I heard, and it's purely an estimate, but it's over 2 billion tons. It's estimated to be in the ground in North America right now. Not all of it's going to be the same, right? How usable it is. Some of it may have been put in there in the 1950s. Some of it was put in there in the 1990s, right? It's just a matter of each source has to be evaluated. So it's hard to say what the runway is on it, but it's probably significant.
Yeah. Great. Another question here. This is a good one. The person says, thanks for your presentation. Have you tried type 1T, a P30L15, so pozzolan 30, limestone 15? If it could have a lower clinker factor and an enhanced ASR impact. So is that something you've looked at with some of the trials you've done?
We've continued, as I mentioned, just like with Duracem F, right? It was a successful product. We could have just said, hey, it's working, we're good, and not done anything else. But we wanted, to kind of take the next step with what we're doing with the Duracem N, at 35% calcined clay. And I can say that, we're continuing to push on that as well with other ideas and seeing where we can take it. Obviously there's a more sustainable probably blend out there.
All right, thanks for that. Have you used this product for buildings, or has it only been used on the DOT project so far?
So far, it's been the two DOTs. We have done some footings just very recently here in the local market. Like I said, the product we're in the process of making the changeover now from Duracem F to Duracem N. So we're starting to get that feedback, but I'll say the ones that I'm aware of right now are footings and the road projects that we've done.
Okay, great. And on that, I'm just going to ask when for the paving projects, because that's obviously the one that you've been working on most. What are some of the key I guess, challenges, things you've had to work with on the paving end of things. And I kind of like that chocolate looking pavement. It looks pretty cool. But so what can you say about that? I know you did some testing with Minroad, you said. Anything that you can share that you've worked on and where you found that you need to address in the field?
For the most part, like I said, it was, when you develop and throughout the other industries and things in the construction industry, developed a lot of products, right? There's always that gotcha that usually pops up, right? When you think you're kind of over the finish line. And this one, once I think because there was so much work put in and so much collaboration and validation done through multiple parties that when we got to the point where we're actually paving a road, it just went as expected, right? Like we were kind of like, oh, okay, kept waiting for that shoe to drop and it didn't. And then when we did the second paving project here this spring, it was kind of like, okay, well maybe it was a one-off, but no, we were seeing the same results, coming out of it. It's just like any, hey, the weather, right, can be the site conditions, the contractor. There's all these variables that go into concrete has a mind of its own, right? And it's just a matter of that day. But I'll say, I think we've done a very good job of mitigating as many things from what we can control as we possibly could.
Absolutely. And just probably a little bit on the same as, again, person indicated great presentation. So thank you for that. Was the water demand fixed entirely with reduced grinding aid, or was there other additive in the cement blend?
There's some other things we've had to do with the process. That was definitely a key unlock for us. I'll say it's proprietary at this point, what we've unlocked with it, with utilizing a calcined clay in our process. But yeah, that was a big piece of it, right? Because like I said, we rolled it out in 2022 when there was a demand issue and people were like, yeah, just give it to us. And,
Yeah.
they're like, would you give us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Another question. Do you maintain ASTM C 1012 testing for sulfate resistance of your blended cements?
Yes, we do.
Okay. That was a pretty straightforward one. So,
Yeah.
so another question here. Are you seeing a pullback in use of type 1L cements in the eastern region? Can blended cements fill the gap so we can continue moving forward toward our sustainable goals and commitments? Thank you for the presentation and great job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think it's market by market. I have heard of some markets that have potentially rolled back or going to a 1-2. And I think this is a great opportunity, right? Because what we know we can do with blended cements from a performance standpoint, we can exceed probably their expectations of what they're doing. But it's going to be a market by market and things like that. Now, that said, if there are markets where 1L may have had some challenges or perceived challenges or issues, it's going to make that a little harder step for us initially to bring that blended cement solution to market, whoever it may be, whether it's Ash Grove or anybody. But yeah, I think there's there's the doors open for opportunities out there with blended cements right now.
Yeah, and just kind of on that too, the another question was, apart from what you're doing with your products, maybe you can just chime in on this, which other types of manufacturers are producing LC3 and fly ash based blended cements in the market? How widespread is it now, I guess, compared from a market perspective right now? Are you seeing it in the US?
Honestly, it's not that widespread as far as commercially, it's out there available. I will say a lot of the fly ash blended being done at the ready mix level, right? So they're just sourcing fly ash and cement separately and doing the blend there. The one thing was in, from our Durasem F product that made it unique was it was interground. So it was co-interground with the fly ash and the cement. So it was a little different product, ultimately properties, things like that, and performance that
Yeah.
you would have gotten mixed at the ready mix level.
Yeah, and this kind of hits on that same thing, Mike. The question, because Durasem F is made with fly ash and would be more available across the country, would Durasem N be more of a localized product?
It really depends on the market needs. Like as I mentioned in the presentation, clay sources are widely available in the US, right? It's just a matter of it makes logistic and economic sense to utilize them. But yeah, this depends on market by market. But yeah, a good question though, because there's a lot of fly ash still out there. It's just a matter of balancing what the market needs are and economically and what makes sense.
So another question here, is regarding specifications. So obviously your company and you're working with some newer products and in innovation. What do you see are some of the biggest challenges with what you're seeing in specifications or getting people to use the proper specifications? What do you think are some of those challenges, and maybe as an industry, what we can do to work on that?
Yeah, I think this is a big one, right? It's not just Ash Grove. If we go at it alone, it's going to be tough, right? I think all of us need to work together to get the industry to adopt these new cements, right? To make them, you know, more acceptable to them. And how do we do that, right? I think being able to, like we did with Duracem F, be able to say, hey, look, we've used it in the real world at a scale, right? We've done it. Here it is. It makes it easier for them to say, okay, yeah, we'll listen to this versus it's a, hey, we did some work in a lab type of thing, right? And we've got some really interesting results, but there's a long bridge right between there and actual real world applications. So I think, yeah, all of us working together and kind of bringing our products to market and ideas and collaborating, right, where we can to make it more acceptable and mainstream for the use of these blended cements.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. So I will do we'll do maybe a last question here and then we'll wrap up. So I was fascinated with your slide that had the balance. It was called choosing the right opportunities to pursue, and it had the balance, the three circles. So with a perfect customer, there's a lot of things that could make things successful, correct? So what do you
Correct.
think are some of the key things that, you would go with a customer to try to look at without, divulging anything, but for your company, but what do you think are some of those challenges and ways that you could work with customers so that we could be more innovative in this area, bringing some of these new products?
Yes, I think it really starts with thinking differently
Mm,
than we have traditionally, right? I think we're all guilty. Sometimes it's an industry that's kind of done things one way for a very long time, and being able to think outside the box a little bit, which I think a lot of people, like I said, with those startups and things, there's a lot of innovation, different thinking happening now, but also understanding where are the pain points of our customers, right? At the end of the day, because if we can have all these great ideas and innovations, but if they're not really solving their pain points, there's not going to be a lot of interest in what we do. So it's really getting out there, talking to customers, understanding what their needs are, and coming back and saying, how do we marry that up with the research work that we're doing? What makes sense? What can we deliver?
excellent. I think that's a good one to end on, kind of wrap things all up. So thanks again, Mike, for the presentation today. It was excellent. And
Thank you.
we
Appreciate
really
it.
appreciate your time, and for all those who attended.